I had a discussion with an individual from the White House, and that occurred back on September the 23rd, I believe. And that person basically told me that, hey, once these immigrants get across the border, that's all we really care about. And to me, that's a problem. And so, Aurora, we are now in the process, as many other cities throughout this nation, of trying to pick up the pieces of an incredibly bad system that was in place.
So it looks like the apartment takeovers in Colorado are still going on and are more of a problem than some would originally led us to believe. Check this out.
Story out of Aurora, Colorado, as police investigate what they call an evil and vicious kidnapping at an apartment complex. Yes, that apartment complex that has been terrorized by members of the violent Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. Police are not confirming if the suspects are part of that gang, but they say they are believed to be undocumented Venezuelans accused of tying up and beating two people last night, stabbing one of them and robbing the home. Senior correspondent Alicia Acuna has the whole story for us as she reports live from Denver. Hi, Alicia.
Hi, Martha. The Aurora police chief says that the two victims, who are a man and a woman, are also Venezuelan migrants. And he says they were brave to call 911. The details of this crime are just horrific. Police detained up to 15 suspects believed to be Venezuelan migrants as well, who they say broke into an apartment, took the victims to another unit where they were bound, pistol whipped, and the male was stabbed. They were terrorized for more than 4 hours before the victims promised not to call police if released, and they were. And the victims did call authorities. Today, the police chief had strong words for the White House.
I had a discussion with an individual from the White House, and that occurred back on September the 23rd, I believe. And that person basically told me that, hey, once these immigrants get across the border, that's all we really care about. And to me, that's a problem. And so, Aurora, we are now in the process, as many other cities throughout this nation, of trying to pick up the pieces of an incredibly bad system that was in place.
Isn't it crazy how more and more news reports come out post-election, post-debate? We start getting more details of what's really going on. It wasn't that long ago when J.D. Vance was on ABC News and having a conversation, more like a debate with one of the newscasters. And stick around, because I'm about to show that video here shortly, just to refresh everyone's recollection. And they were trying to downplay what was going on. And I mean, it's just insane. So stick around as I show you that video, but we'll continue on. We'll show you the rest of this one first.
This is the same complex, as you mentioned, Martha, where that Ring camera captured armed TDA members. The chief says there's no question last night's attack was committed by gang members, but can't yet confirm that these are TDA. Today, the Aurora City Councilwoman who sounded the alarm on this issue had this to say.
Oh, and one more thing real quick. If you know anything about the TDA gang, this is their MO. This is what they did in Venezuela. I'm going to link a video right up here that I did where I did a deep dive on who these people are, their origins, so you can learn a lot more about them and you can be more equipped to have conversations about this topic.
I'm tired of this situation being downplayed. I am tired of this being portrayed as just another gang in Aurora. This is actual human suffering of the most vulnerable community, the ones who would otherwise be afraid to call 911.
Great.
And Martha, those two victims are still in the hospital. Martha.
I mean, just think about it. If this was going down under Donald Trump's watch or anybody on the right, if something like this was going down due to their negligence, apartment complexes were being taken over by gang members or violent offenders, this would be a massive uproar and the media would not be trying to minimize it or trying to downplay it. But that's what we got. It just shows you, and I say this in almost every video I make where the media comes up, is that these folks should not be trusted because they've shown themselves to be completely indoctrinated and they're willing to lie or minimize almost every story in order to make the Democratic Party look good. It's utterly insane. But here's that video I was telling you about, just to offer a bit of a refresher so that you're reminded as to what the narrative was when we first started hearing these stories about these apartment complexes in Colorado.
But I want to, we played some other comments about migrants,
Well,
including in Aurora, in Colorado, where Trump said the city had been invaded and conquered by Venezuelan gangs. The Republican mayor of the city said flatly the city and state have not been taken over or invaded or occupied by migrant gangs.
And look at the nitpicking they do with every word. Now, we all say stuff like that. Sometimes if you're in a conversation with your spouse and they do something that irritates you, and you may say something like, you always do this, you always do that. Of course, they don't always do that, but that's just some of the hyperbolic, exaggerating words that we use in our common dialogues. So they nitpick on the fine points of something that Donald Trump would say, and then they'll come out and say, oh, they didn't invade, they didn't take over the whole state or the whole city. But the mere idea that there were multiple apartment complexes that have been taken over by these gangs is a problem. It is a major problem. But what do they do during this discussion? Oh, she tries to minimize it and act like it's not that big of a deal.
So do you support Donald Trump making those claims that the Republican mayor says were grossly exaggerated and have hurt the city's identity and sense of safety? I understand what you're saying, that some people left behind, but he's making these statements that the mayor is flat out disputing.
And another thing, since when did we just assume that all politicians are truthful? Like, when did that come out? When did that come to be? Or is it just certain politicians who we have a tendency to want to agree with? I've been around long enough to know that people say stuff in order to push their certain political agenda on both sides. But man, these reporters, and they wonder why their approval ratings are so low. They wonder why the trust of the American public is so low. Crap like this.
Well, Martha, you just said the mayor said they were exaggerated.
Grossly
That
exaggerated.
means that means there's got to be some element of truth here. And of course, President Trump was actually in Aurora, Colorado, talking to people on the ground. And what we're hearing, of course, Martha, is that people are terrified by what has happened with some of these Venezuelan gangs.
Senator Vance, I'm going to stop you because I know exactly what happened.
Martha.
I'm going to stop you. The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs,
Right.
And Donald Trump is the problem and not Kamala Harris's open border. Americans are so fed up with what's going on, and they have every right to be. And I really find this exchange, Martha, sort of interesting because you seem to be more focused with nitpicking everything that Donald Trump has said, rather than acknowledging that apartment complexes in the United States of America are being taken over by violent gangs. I worry.
And they wouldn't have been had it not been for the Biden and Harris administration's open border policies. This would not have even been a thing. Not have even been a thing. But yet the big issue was Donald Trump and his rhetoric. These people really make me sick.
So much more about that problem than anything else here. We've got to get American communities in a safe space again. And unfortunately, when you let people in by the millions, most of whom are unvetted, most of whom you don't know who they really are, you're going to have problems like this. Kamala Harris, 94 executive orders that undid Donald Trump's successful border policies. We knew this stuff would happen. They bragged about opening the border, and now we have the consequences, and we're living with it. We can do so much better, but frankly, we're not going to do better, Martha, unless Donald Trump calls this stuff out. I'm glad that he did.
Okay.
I mean, it's pathetic is the only word. Disgusting, that's another word that I can use to describe how these people operate. The people in Colorado, the people who are suffering as a result of these policies, yes, as a result of these policies, these things are in the home invasions, the home invasions are a direct correlation to these open border policies. And despite all the attacks that went on over the last few years with the media and the lawfare that went down, this is why Donald Trump was elected. It's pretty cut and dry. It's pretty plain and simple. And what's really scary is how I'm thankful for social media, and social media can be a double-edged sword. It can be a blessing and it can be a curse. But at the same time, it's opened the door for a lot of independent media, independent news outlets to be able to be honest and counteract a lot of the BS, a lot of the garbage that we get from these entities. Again, the mainstream media is completely untrustworthy. They have no issue bearing false witness and lying in order to further their political purposes. And it's really sad. And again, I encourage everyone out there to find other media sources. Go on X. There were so many people out there reporting news in a fair and balanced perspective, in a fair and balanced way. And you don't have to be stuck listening to these people just because you've been listening to or watching ABC News or NBC or CNN or whoever it is for years. You don't have to be beholden to them. They've lost the trust of the American people completely. Before you go, if you appreciate content like this, make sure you give me a subscribe and a like, and I'll see you on the next video.